Go ahead.
Arrangement and classification. No inference, implication, or presumption of legislative construction shall be drawn or made by reason of the location or grouping of any particular section, a provision, or portion of this title, nor shall any table of contents, table of cross-references, or similar outline, analysis, or descriptive matter relating to the contents of this title be given any legal effect.
How much legal effect does that book have?
Any legal effect.
It has no legal effect. Would you read the next statement?
The preceding sentence also applies to the side notes and ancillary tables contained in the various prints of this act before its enactment into law.
Okay, when will it have legal effect upon you?
Upon enactment into law.
When it's enacted into law. All right. Now, you see, you have been told that our taxes are mandatory. That's the way we have been brought up. You see, in 1945, in 1942, there's only 15% of the people of the United States paying taxes. They were federal employees. In 1945, 85% of the people were paying taxes. Why was there such a difference? The difference was that in 1945, we were winning the war. And we were asked by our government to help pay to win the war. It was a voluntary compliance system at that time, and it hasn't changed. We voluntarily complied to pay that extra tax. That was supposed to last for only 2 years. But at the end of that 2 years, Congress enacted once again to extend this tax for another 4 years. Still, the rules haven't changed. It was a voluntary compliance system. At the end of those 4 years, Congress enacted again and extended it for another 4 years. By that time, we had been paying taxes for 10 years, voluntarily. But it was only after that time that the Internal Revenue Service began to flex their muscles and begin to push us into auditing and to other things to where we began to believe that our tax system was mandatory. Now, this book does say it's mandatory. And in fact, if you open this book up, and you read the very first statement in this book, says taxes imposed by the Internal Revenue Code are listed below. All right, now if you open that book up and you read taxes imposed by what authority? By the Internal Revenue Code. What's the Internal Revenue Code? That's this book right here. How much legal effect does this book have? None. All right? We're going to study another word that it talks about. It talks anybody made liable. How are you made liable? By contract? By agreement? By committing an act? You're made liable when you go through a fence of your neighbor's yard with an automobile, right? When you commit an act against your neighbor, you're made liable. We have all been filling out our 1040 forms, haven't we?
Yes.
Faithfully. Can you show me in Title 26 where it tells you that you have to fill out a 1040 form? There's no law in this book. In fact, if you can find a law in this book that tells you that you have to fill out a 1040 form that makes you liable, I will give you $500,000. Now, the reason I can be so benevolent is because there is a sheriff in the state of Oregon who has volunteered or put a reward out for anybody to find that law for $1 million. So if you find that law, you come let me know and I'll split it with you, okay? All right. Now, some of you may ask, well, why are you doing this, Al? Well, I want you to know that I did not select the IRS. They selected me. I have here a notice of levy on wages, salary, and other income. Dave, would you testify that we have here a notice of levy?
668W, notice of levy.
668W, okay. And can you give me the date of that levy?
August 14th, 1990.
August 14th, 1990. And it was on whose wages?
Albert E. and Bonnie Carter.
Yours truly. And can you give me the amount of money that they would like to collect from Albert E. and Bonnie Carter?
$117,357.56.
That's a lot when you don't have it.
That's a
Yes.
lot when you do have it.
There's a lot when you do have it. Okay. All right. So now we have a levy on myself and my wife. And I think it's legitimate at this time to explain to you why they feel that I need to pay that amount, or needed to pay that amount. In 1980 and 81, I was selling a book called The Miracles of Rebound Exercise. We're selling a lot. In fact, we sold 25,000 copies a month for 18 months in a row. I don't have to tell you that we were doing all right. In fact, I had a CPA who was working for me, and his job was to take care of all of my accounting and make sure that I didn't have to worry about the IRS at the end of the year. So at the end of the year, I turned to my CPA and I said, hey, how much money do I owe? He said, you owe, in taxes, about $25,000. I reached for my checkbook to write out the check, and he says, wait a minute, Al. You really don't have to pay that $25,000 because you've got until April 15th to figure out what else to do with that money, because you can buy a tax shelter. He explained to me the tax shelter and pointed out that it's perfectly legitimate and all right and okay, and in fact that's one of the best things you can do, and I invested in a tax shelter in oil and gas. Everything was all right until 36 months later. 36 months later, I received a letter from the Internal Revenue Service saying the tax shelter you have invested in has been disallowed. And oh, by the way, it's retroactive to back to 1980. So now you owe 36 months of interest and penalty, and instead of owing $25,000, you now owe $50,000. Well, you win a few, you lose a few. I'm going to have to pay it. Until just a few days later, I received another letter from the from the gas and oil company. The gas and oil company said, the IRS is indicating that they have disallowed this tax shelter. We want you to know that this is perfectly legitimate. We have good accounts, good attorneys, and in fact, we used the IRS in setting up this system, and we used all of the rules and regulations. By the way, we may have to go to court. If we go to court, it's going to take 3 to 5 years to get this thing through, so don't worry about it for the next 3 to 5 years. So I did. 2 years later, I received the visit from 2 ladies. They drove up behind my automobile, bumper to bumper, walked into my office, and then, in front of some of my clients, customers, they said, excuse me, who owns that car out there? I said, I do. They said, we're with the Internal Revenue Service. We came to pick up your automobile because you owe us some money. I invited them into my private office. We had words. Sometimes they're loud. Sometimes they're quiet. Sometimes I cried. But at the end, I pulled out the keys to my car and took them off and gave them to them. You see, they had informed me that if I didn't do that, they would make sure that I lost my office, that I lost my business, and that I'd lose my house, and I'd be thrown out into the streets. Not knowing any better, I gave them the keys to the car and waved goodbye as the car drove down the road. 2 weeks later, at the very same moment I was being served papers in my office, my wife was receiving papers at her front door. And she was informed once again that she'd better pack her bags because this wasn't going to be a very good place for her to live. To make a long story short, I did lose my business. I had a levy against everything, and my creditors began to want their money before the IRS got real tight and tried to get their money. And eventually my wife informed me that she felt that she should connect her wagon up to a better star